Hi, welcome to another Azure Centric Podcast on our weekly updates. My name is Marcos Nogueira, and with me, my partner in crime, Andrew Lowes. How are you, Andrew?
Welcome, everybody, and thank you, sir. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah.
It's another beautiful sunny evening, afternoon here in the great province of Alberta.
Yes.
And as we move into spring, so with spring comes a change. And we decided to switch things up a little bit today, right?
Absolutely. We got a very good feedback, in this case, from one of our subscribers and listeners um, that give us this. Why don't you change? You're talking about change for this, and we are experimenting. So if you guys like it, let us know. If you guys hate it, let us know as well. We
Absolutely.
really want to hear from you to see how we can improve and doing this show better in this case. But for now, first of all, we are recording on daylight time, and that was one of the highest requests that we have because people enjoy us, our morale, when it's daylight time and instead of the grumpiness of the nighttime.
Well, so there is a bit of a challenge with that as we go through our
Absolutely.
northern mountain weather winters here in Alberta.
Yeah.
It gets dark sometimes, and the worst of it is like 3:30 in the afternoon. It starts to get dark there, and it
Absolutely.
does wear you down a little bit. And I think we all around these parts here, anyways, we do get a little bit grouchy.
Yeah.
And now that spring is here and we're changing things and new things are starting to grow and clean up and all that stuff, so are we. And we have sprung with our newfound format. But to fit in with all of this change, we actually have some really, really great topics that came through on the blogs and the updates this week with Azure, right?
Absolutely. So we are covering very good topics. I like our agenda for this week, and we are talking about several areas. The areas that from monitoring, in this case SQL, from availability zones, the way that Microsoft is being not attacking but addressing the availability zones, addressing the high availability inside of Azure, new regions coming, or new areas, in this case, development areas that they are coming, new types of VMs, new certifications. I
Mm-hmm.
think I cover all of that, right?
Yeah,
Basically,
absolutely. Yeah, I think it's going to be really good. There's a lot of really good things,
yes,
and I know we have our little areas that we do get excited about. So
absolutely.
if you have anything that you'd like to chat about, just jump in and
Just
interrupt
jump.
me.
Absolutely, there's no problem with that. And what we will have is a very good way to segue this. So let's roll our intro video, and then let's jump to the first update. Okay, and the first update that we have this week is the Azure Expanse PCI DSS certification.
Hmm.
So means that the payment card industry data security standards certification is hitting, in this case, or Azure was able to fulfill that part. Another certification for Azure. I already stopped counting certifications, and now on Azure in this case, I already stopped on mine as well. But but then I stopped a long time ago. But that's a different conversation.
Just one or two, I think, in there, right? Yeah. So,
Yeah, something
yeah.
like
And
that.
by
Yeah.
the way, well said, because these certifications are not just a mouthful;
Oh my
they're
God. Yeah.
quite complex as well in many cases, right? So,
Yes.
this has been a long time coming,
Yeah.
and it's very critical, right? Because it's about encryption, it's about guaranteeing, and it's about the way we can audit, I'm going to try and say this, auditability. There we go. So we can then check and enforce and make sure that we're in compliance with the PCI DSS standard, which is really important because it means that we're not retaining user and credit card information in the same things, and that the fields are encrypted, and there's all these different safeguards. It's a very specific thing. It's like HIPAA, right?
Exactly.
And
helps in this case, the credit card fraud as well to be reduced.
Absolutely, yeah, it's very critical. And one of the things that's worth noting is we've both done work with different retail companies and clients over the years. And in Canada, PCI DSS is not required. But many retail companies, especially ones that do cross-border, both US and Canada when they're North American, they do comply with PCI DSS. Because then all of their data can be stored in the US or Canada, and they don't have to worry about kind of the different rules and demarking where they're storing that data as much, right, for that type of data. So, any kind of a compliance measure is always a very positive thing, and it's really good. So, I'm very impressed, very happy that that's in there, and certainly, feel free to visit the Azure Compliance. What do they call this? The Service Trust Portal, I believe.
Yes, it's where they have all the certifications for Azure, no matter what they have. And what I like about this PCI DSS, it's a kind of an international way to protect, in this case, payments.
That's right.
And now you have available, so a lot of e-commerce that we see, they are hosted, for example, in Azure. And now they are way more secure to have those payments. You don't need third party to go third party, and then your site, it's not performant. Now you have that capability inside of Azure, and you can increase and going less and less outside of your environments.
Exactly.
I think
it's about
that's
keeping
a very
things
good one.
in-house, and of course, the less hands that touch a set of data,
Exactly.
The lower the opportunity for bad things to happen, right?
Happens, exactly. That's a very good point. Moving to the next one, to the new Brazil South availability zones is now GA, general available. So it means that the region of Brazil South got increased with 3 unique physical separated data centers, or what's called inside of Azure zones. On that single region, which is very good for our friends in South America, because this was one of the main, and I think it was the first region in South America of Azure, and now you have availability zones, and that goes without saying, or without kind of doing anything harmless to our agenda. We have a very good post or update regarding this, why we are seeing all of these updates regarding availability zones.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
but this is a very nice one.
Yeah, our friends in Brazil have been very patiently waiting, because like you said, they were, I think you're right, because I think that Brazil was the first South American region, and it's been there for a little bit, and now they're just getting availability zones. And I think we all feel like that a little bit. We're waiting on it, and it's certainly a required feature when you have any kind of HA or really just business continuity planning that needs to be applied to your systems that are running in Azure. Availability zones really, really help you to be compliant with all of those requirements in your system. So I know I'm excited about that. Not that I have any assets in Brazil South, but you never know. COVID's going to be over soon enough with all this stuff going on.
You can have electronic assets because Azure is globally, and you don't need to be in Brazil to have assets in this case, right?
I'm just saying, if I was on the beach, it would be a lot better to access anything, I think.
Absolutely. Although without going on the very polemic subject, the numbers in Brazil, it doesn't look good to even
No,
consider
it
being
does
there.
look like they may be struggling a little bit to get that. So I
Yeah,
hope that vaccines and healthcare and everything can help the safety of everybody there for
absolutely.
sure.
And they are so innovative that they even create a new kind of a new way of the coronavirus. So it's not only the English one, the South African. Now you have the Brazilian one. So it's
Yeah,
like the.
it's on the world tour. That's for
It,
darn sure, isn't it?
I never thought about that. World tour of coronavirus. Yeah,
Hey, somebody gets to travel. That's good.
exactly. Yes.
Okay, moving on.
Moving on. Let's talk about other things. Azure Storage version 1.18, it's now generally available. Storage Explorer, I have to say. I forgot about that. I apologize.
Yep, correct.
Azure Storage
Yeah, and
Explorer.
this is a timely update because I was actually using Storage Explorer not this week but the week before, and I did notice a couple of dare I say slow-ish features in there. So I'm really happy to see that data transfers are going to be a little bit faster because it actually does use AZ copy in the background, right?
Yeah.
So even though we get that beautiful graphical interface, we're still falling back to the command line AZ
But
copy.
there is an update that is hiding over here that they didn't notice, or at least I noticed, is the version of AZ copy. They did update the version as well. So now it's the version
I saw the version number
10.8.
there. I was waiting. I'm thinking, hey, I wonder if Marcos starts talking about that. I can maybe look up the version number that I had.
So I noticed that part as well, and it's not only that. It's one of the things that when you have trouble, right, on the tooling, you always rely on the logs, and the Azure Storage Explorer logs was a little bit confusing with the names just to find what was the right log. In this case, this update will address that. And that is the part that I like about this because we saw that on the community. I saw that on the community, someone complaining about this. And again, it goes what we saying, I think, every episode on this show that Microsoft listens and this is going along. So it's way easier to clean up now old logs with this version because there are more descriptive names on the names of the logs, which is facilitate things when our good friend Murphy is around and we need to troubleshoot something, right?
Only if you're touching production, usually, right?
Yeah, yeah. And he's always that phrase. It's on my computer works, right?
I don't know. As you know, I did development for a long time when I first started doing IT. I will say a few weeks ago.
A few weeks ago, it's awesome.
I never once told anybody, "Well, I don't know. It worked when I tested it." I would never say that. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
You never say it, or you never remember saying that.
Well, I have a very photogenic memory.
Okay.
So
because I thought that was the first thing that you learn, and now I'm just kidding. Before I'm going to finish the sentence, I'm saying that I'm just kidding. Okay, I don't want the feelings of any developer out there, but I thought that was the first thing that developers learn when they are learning code. Says, please, anything that you say, just say on my machine works, because it's like the same thing that you ask a consultant a question, and the first thing they say is, it depends.
So, the first thing I learned as a developer was that you never hit version 1.0. Never. It's always in beta.
Okay. I think we are decreasing
you don't ever have to defer and say, when I use it, it was fine. It's just you have found an unrequested feature, so we'll document that and we'll get back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we are reducing our viewers of our friends of developers. So let's move on.
I think we were up to 11. Now we might be down a few, so we'll say 8.
Yeah.
Back down to single digits.
let's move on to the next one. I think it's the best way to just
We're in trouble.
try to keep with the single digits if you don't go to negative ones. So limit preview on workloads on AMD-backed virtual machines, confidential without recompiling code. It was not on purpose, I have to say, that we talk about developing and now saying that they make their life easier. It was totally not on purpose, I have to say. But this update is pretty cool because it goes.
It's really cool.
It
so
does.
This was always a pain for me. I did a lot of VB6 and a lot of .NET compiling, and it was always an issue. We always did Intel compile, and then if somebody ended up having an AMD system, we had to recompile the code for that processor because it used anyways, it required some different libraries, right? So one of the things that I thought was absolutely incredible when we did our run through was that when you want to move from an Intel-backed VM, you're now going to be able to simply move the workload without recompiling the code. So Microsoft is doing some very big magic in the back end and allowing everything to run on AMD cores using Intel compiled applications.
And that's yes. The part that I like about this update as well is they are spreading, and for the first time they have these confidential workloads that is a kind of a theme from the last episodes on this show. We're starting with Intel SGX, I think it was that they are with the confidential and going on that confidential path to just hold off that. And we were waiting for AMD. In this case, the new AMD EPYC 7003 series processors, they are able to achieve the same confidentiality, the same confidential, in this case, processing for those VMs, especially for Kubernetes, right? And with like you said, without the need to recompiling, because this was only available on Intel, in this case, processors. So it's marvelous to see that now we can more like I can even say that we are more going on the standardization of developing for confidential, in this case, workloads, using that power of the confidential workloads regarding developing. So we'll probably see with these updates a lot of new applications coming along with now choosing the platform, right? Because you are not needed to go on.
I think it's bigger than that, though, right? Because one of the things that we know right now in our modern society is a challenge is our supply chain. So if we think about processors, I don't believe there's going to be any exceptions to that rule. So from what I've seen in the marketplace, and I do have 1 or 2 ears to the ground with, some younger members of my household, as do you. But also, you've been building your own higher end system for some simulations, right?
Yes.
And it's been tough to get components. So what I see with this, kind of outside just the scope of Intel versus AMD, is if we can become platform agnostic, there we go, not diagnostic, goodness gracious. So platform agnostic with the code and the containers, then if we're able to have AMD machines or Intel machines running those containers and code and apps, it's way better for us as consumers of those services, and it's better for Microsoft running data centers, because now they can do some mixing and matching of hardware when it comes to sets and zones and things like that. Right?
That's a very good point. And I will even add more to that. It's not only that, it's like the competition the healthy competition that we have between Intel and AMD regarding performance, because during my way of I was building the racing simulator, right? I read a lot of reviews of what is a good processing nowadays, and apparently with the new CEO of AMD, they were able to just keep up with the development of those processors, and right now following the benchmarks, you have the best or the fastest PC. Last time I checked it, and probably I'm incorrect or not, or I'm not being very accurate or not. But last time I checked it, the benchmarks of all the PCs, it's no longer an Intel, it's an AMD because of their development, because of that everything, and now besides of that, it's cheaper, right? Because AMD has always been cheaper than Intel. It's more affordable, and you have now a new vendor of this enterprise, because we have to call these enterprise workloads, because it's been dominated by Intel for along the last years, right?
Oh, it has,
The
yeah.
consumer one was kind of dividing, but on the corporate side, on enterprise side, it's been highly dominated by Intel, and now we're starting to see that AMD is coming to place, and they are not really bad on the way that they are doing, like multiprocessing and all of that available and availability in this case of those, like you mentioned, of the supply chain that they have it, and we are only gaining because we'll see better VMs, faster VMs, and cheaper VMs, because as a consumers, even on the corporate side, it's what we want, right?
Well, absolutely. Yeah. And I know, clients in the last year, especially, I've seen have really been focused on cost management.
Yes.
Not just in the conventional sense of like Azure cost management, but also power management. How can we right size the VMs on a tighter schedule, right? Instead of manually reviewing, how do we automate this process and all of these things. And there's a lot of things that Azure has been really actively doing.
Yeah.
Massive improvements coming out of Ignite this year in 2021 with policy, right? Azure policy. So
And costs.
like a huge number of ads for Azure
Absolutely.
policy this year.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of commitment across the spectrum. So
And
I
that's
think
the best
we have
segue
done
for
that
the next one.
more than enough.
I will let you introduce the next update, because it could not be the best segue.
It's the cost management guy. I know. I'm not the SharePoint guy. Come on, man. Poor SharePoint. They always take a beating on that one. But
Yeah.
now generally available, monitor your spending through forecasted cost alerts with Azure Cost Management and Billing.
Yeah.
So this one is really neat because it's been a little bit in preview for a bit, right?
Yeah.
And I know in my own tenant, I actually use this because I use the forecasted spend a lot. And I do my alerting based on that for budgeting, so that I can make sure that I'm on target. And if I'm going to be near my budget, I get an alert. If I'm really close to my budget, I get another alert. And then when I go over my budget, of course, it definitely alerts. So it's really important because when I think about using it on my small scale in my little own tenant and scaling that up to thousands of VMs, and other, with thousands of VMs, you have many other resources as well, VNets and load balancers and Azure Firewall and all of these good things that we get, right? But
Absolutely.
it's really important that we forecast what the costs are, especially I think of newer customers or organizations going into kind of cloud. And I remember, do you remember working with me when it was my first going to cloud experience? I mean, I
Yes.
remember it very clearly still. And it was really not scary, but there was a lot to worry about because
Yeah.
there's unknowns. Like, how much is this going to cost if I use V1 versus V2 of something? What's the cost difference if I use basic versus standard? What does that really mean for a monthly invoice. And the forecasting can really help kind of calm those human fears down a little bit.
Yeah. And I agree with you. What I like about the forecasting on this is and it's always a sensitive topic when you're talking about, like you mentioned, new customers, because it's easy for us to forecast how much you're going to pay for a VM, right? Because we're going to the Azure calculator, and we know that the VM, if it's 100% running, that is about 720 hours, if I'm not mistaken, on the Azure calculator. We can go there and say, I want monthly cost of this, and that it's usually not that much of a difference, right? But there are other services that they are really pay as you go, and it's really difficult. For example, the one that I've been, and I use this, I have to say, I use this really this week, because I was with the customer in this case, that they were trying to know how much is going to cost to run, for example, a SQL database on Azure and having an application on-prem using PaaS. And one of the things that they wanted to know is how much going to cost it. They say, yeah, it's easy and difficult to do it, because we have variables over here that we have to take into consideration, and one of them is networking. It's impossible to have a cost of networking, because the first 5 gigs, okay, they are free. It's not impossible if you have express route, I think, with the premium SKU.
Yeah, when you have the
unlimited, exactly the same cost.
It makes life a little easier because it's a flat cost analysis.
But if you don't have that, even if you have something like a VPN, for example, like you and me, VPN now becomes a free service, right? But if you're going over the 5 gigs, okay, and the good thing about the forecast is analyze your consumption, right, and give you a prediction how much is going to cost you at the end of the month. So at least, like your example is perfect. I can put some alerts saying that, because sometimes what happens is, and I have a lot of customers that doing that, and you have as well, and you that you are listening, you're probably seeing that as well, is we only know how much we are consuming, right, at the end of the month.
Yes.
Because no one, when I say no one, it's very, very small percentage, okay, probably on the single figures, that they will monitoring how much they are trafficking between the region, okay?
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing, right? Because this forecasting tool takes all of that into account. Last time I did look it up, I think it was once every 24 hours. So if you run for like 1 business week, for example, then you can have a good idea of what your monthly spend or throughputs are going to be based on that forecasting. And that was it was in preview. So I wasn't like holding it to any kind of accountability in that time, but I did add in some other services. I had some load balancing and some different. I had a lot of logic apps actually in the last couple of months that I've been using.
And those are dangerous because those are built by transaction. Like I'm thinking a couple of services on top of my head that this is going to be awesome. So networking is one of them. For example, Event Hub is another one of them. All of those services that they are basically related to the amount of data that you are trafficking. In this case, from that region out, because what it counts on networking is egress. But for example, on Event Hub is the number of messages that you are passing. In this case, on Logical Apps is the number of run times, I think, or the same, or something that is going to be on the build side, on the build cycle. it's where you can have that help to just doing that, right? And that will
Yeah,
it will
the one
save
thing
you.
about logic apps that I found was that you do have to be cautious about how you build and design it.
Hmm.
I should say design and then build, I suppose. But you have to be careful because a lot of cases I've been using them to kick off other processes. So if you have, for example, triggers firing on a schedule or based on different criteria, like CPU load is a good example. So if you monitor a VM and it hits 90%, you have the logic app trigger and some things happen. So you need to be careful because maybe your antivirus kicks off and it's scanning something. Maybe somebody's doing something or the system is processing something. Even
Absolutely.
updates being applied can cause these CPU spikes. So you may have an unexpected number of triggers on something like that, and then you're kicking off other processes. So it can daisy chain down. And yeah, it's always just understanding what you're architecting, understanding what you're building out, and test,
Absolutely.
not in production,
But
right?
exactly.
Because we have to understand how it's going to end up.
Uh,
Yeah, and cost is one of those
it
variables.
is because it's very easy to go over completely over, and especially on those type of applications on fiction on Azure that we don't have like for example VMs, if you can compare with that we don't know for sure how much it's going to cost me because I cannot predict how much times I will run into that if you going trigger some events or something like that to be responsive is going to be very difficult. In this case, this forecast will allow you to have at least a notion with certain alerts, right? That you can have it to doing that. It's pretty cool, pretty cool. Moving on to the next update. Azure Monitor SQL Insights for Azure SQL is in public preview. In public preview, yes. Uh, this is pretty cool, I have to say, because it's related to monitoring. Okay, and now you can have, in this case, more insight of what's going to happen on your SQL when you're running pass, because usually
Hmm.
it's really difficult to understand what is going on the pass because it's kind
Yep.
of managed by Microsoft, and now you will have SQL insights regarding inside of your Azure Monitor logs. So I'm really happy that they are on that path. Again, it's in preview, so
It is.
it's not recommended to have in production, although this is monitoring. So even if you apply this in production, it will not be impactful, but you have to be
Test it
considered,
first.
of course, of several things. One of them is false alerts, okay, because it's in preview. Another thing is when it becomes GA, you probably need to redeploy it for our experience, right? And the
Especially with monitoring tools, I
exactly,
found.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that is the page that you have to draw a line of the sand to see if that is doable or not for you. But it's something that if you are uh, deploying this against your SQL in production to just see really the insights that you have it's not going to be very critical. It's not going to be impactful. I don't know if that's going to hand or is get to have more load on Azure SQL. Those are some of those tests that you need to run, right?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. One of the things I like about the SQL Insights is that it brings the multiple, like if you have multiple PaaS databases, you can bring them into a single source now with Azure Monitor,
Yeah.
right? So it's all in one place, and that is so important because then it can go back to, if you have a network operations center or a service desk, for example, that responds to events generated from your
Yeah.
monitoring. Is SQL. I always think when you have the trigger number of transactions is exceeding or close to exceeding your capacity for the level of database or power that you've got. The SQL. I always remember having to manage RAM.
Yeah.
So I know it's a little bit different with PaaS, but you still have an allocated amount of memory that's usable with your database in your PaaS package.
Absolutely.
So it's still important to monitor those critical markers from SQL, whether you have, no matter how you're running your SQL server, you have to monitor your databases for that kind of stuff.
Although this is not only applicable to SQL PaaS, you can have that on SQL Managed Instance as well, Azure SQL Managed Instance, SQL VMs, and even inside of the VM as well. The part of this is only supported from SQL Server 2012 and newer in this case. So it's not only for PaaS, but it will cover the PaaS that was always the difficult part of monitoring, because we can have Azure Monitor on VMs as well, that we can monitoring that because we can't control the OS. In this case, we don't control the OS on the PaaS, right? And that was the part that I want to reinforce, but not exclude as well. So this Azure SQL Insight is going to be available for VMs as well that you have running on Azure, which is really awesome, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. 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 It's really cool. And I remember, we used to have to use third-party products to get that level of monitoring, and the granular information that's available, just kind of, I don't want to say freely, because I guess it's not really free, but available with the product, right? With SQL PaaS or Managed SQL. And is really good, really good granular logs with the insights. It's very similar to the, as you would expect, I guess, from the title, like App Insights. Data collection, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of good information to be had there. It's really good for diagnostics and, again, for forecasting, so that you can predict problems before they arrive and impact your production area. So, of course, that is in preview. So test in preview, like your dev test or something first. But like you were saying, and I actually agree, usually we have, you and I both align really well on this stuff with kind of preview products. We usually have a very hard line about no, do not use these things in production. But on this case, we're a little bit softer because it's monitoring. It's not necessarily providing a production service that's being consumed directly by users. But there is, like you were saying, some cautions with that.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. But it's not the only Azure SQL update this week. So we have another one in preview as well. That is the long-term backup retention, the LTR, for Azure SQL Managed Instance, the Azure SQL MI, that is in public preview. Pretty cool that, again, we are able to attach to a PaaS server that is Managed Instance a long-term backup retention.
This one's really cool because it now means you can retain your SQL Managed Instance backups, full backups, for up to 10 years, I think is what I'm seeing here.
Yes,
10 years. Yeah, and you can restore any of those backups, say from 9 years ago, to a new database. That is really, really critical, because if you have to do that for audit purposes, or if you have to do that to get, I know I had one instance where I had to restore a database once because one of the people we had on the team did a merge, and it did not behave the way we all thought it would, and we all okayed the SQL code before it was executed. And it was, okay, let's restore just this table. We'll get it out of the new database and we'll merge that table back in so that we don't have to take production down. We can just kind of do this and beg for forgiveness, but let's get at it very quickly.
Yes, absolutely. It's always good to have a good strategy for backup, and especially in this case for PaaS. In this case, we're starting to see a lot of those PaaS improvements on the same way that we are doing on-prem. And continuing with this Azure SQL, now we have the Service Broker Message Exchange for SQL Managed Instance in public preview. So
That's well said. That one was a mouthful.
completely,
That was tough.
completely.
Yeah, well done. Yeah, so this is like kind of a minor theme that we have a little bit with the SQL PAS and SQL Managed Instance this week, right?
Yeah,
So they've been working very hard, and this preview supports the cross-instance message exchange for Azure SQL Managed Instance, and it's used usually in tiered applications is where we see this, right? So if you're not familiar with this, this is more something that DBAs or app developers that develop large scale applications that are broken out into tiers would deal with the message queues, and in this case, SQL service broker message exchange
yeah.
for SQL.
What I like about this is like you mentioned, it goes to across different instances or multiple instances, but does as well across multiple subscriptions and AD tenants as well. So it's really okay across basically everything. Although and the way that they are doing this is because it's certificate based trust, and the way that they are doing it's like said, you need to just kind of have the certificate on both ends, so you can have tenants. So means that you have organizations that you can have this service broker that you can exchange those messages on Azure SQL Managed Instance. Uh,
Yeah, so I just want to expand on that if you're cool with that, because
Absolutely.
I think one of the things that would be beneficial for everybody who's still on board with this far in, you're down the rabbit hole. Let's just keep digging. So here's a shovel. But it's better than the pause, right?
Exactly.
So the reason that you would want to use certificate-based trust in different Azure AD tenants. So this was something I thought maybe we should speak to a little bit, because I think people who don't deal with distributed applications and multiple clients might not understand this a little bit. Well, why would I want to make my service available to a different tenant? Well, here's why. So you develop an application that people want to use. You tier that application so you have a front end that handles requests. You want that to be extremely responsive. Maybe it handles authentication and maybe something else too. So you put that in your tenant, but the data is going to be maintained by a provider. So that app that you've built, that you're providing, you're going to host your SQL services of many flavors and extensively. You're going to make sure that it's fully scalable. You have redundancy with sets and zones for availability, and you're going to use load balancers and all of these really great things that Azure just kind of gives easily for us makes easy for us to implement. Then when you build that out, you're going to you're going to take a certificate from your SQL system and make kind of a tunnel to your customer, who then hosts that front end. So when your customer uses that across their distributed environment, very responsive, really good, and it does a data lookup, it's very secure back to yours. And I really love how they're doing the certificate-based trust, because it's going to allow small app developers and smaller shops, small business, to really become very scalable with tiered applications. And I think that that's important, because really what they're doing is allowing small businesses to grow rapidly and scale out. This is something that's near and dear to our hearts, of course, as small business people. But even for large businesses, when we think of let's see here, I don't want to get into too much trouble. Let's think of like a help desk application.
It not need to go on that path. This is going to be good for as well for very large ones. I give you the example that's come to my mind that this is very helpful. It's like, imagine that you have a e-commerce and you have partners, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you're doing and you have your, for example, your products that you are selling, but you have a partner that he wants to see it. So you can connect your system to there to see if they have availability of that product or not. Because that message is going to be easy to implement, because we're talking about two different organizations, two different locations, okay? And because of that, completely only a certificate, it's only required for going and to just exchange those messages. Like something like, do you have in stock that product? Yes, I have. Okay, reserve for me X amount, because now I have an order of this. So those type of things will make the life of integration of those applications, like you were mentioning, not only for small business but for big corporations as well,
definitely, yeah. And I
to
love
be
the
able to do
example of
that.
warehousing. Yeah,
Yeah,
because it's spot on. Because you want to keep your database local. And with message exchange, like service brokers, you can go between instances, right? And that's really, really critical, because you can go like Calgary to Edmonton to Toronto, Vancouver, Seattle, Denver. Doesn't matter, right? Like you can connect different instances if you have big warehousing. And still, again, you're keeping your local system local, fast, and responsive, but still allowing interconnected lookups of distributed systems. So
absolutely.
it's really cool. It's like they sneak in these tiny little updates, right?
Yeah,
And then they drop like this, like 5 or 6 keywords, like certificate-based trusts
yeah,
and Azure AD tenant agnostic, right? And it's
yeah.
like, okay, come on now, you're just trying to see who's reading.
Exactly. And yes, we read all the updates.
We
So
do.
you know, yeah.
Every week, every
Yeah,
week.
absolutely. This one, although it's a little bit bigger and it's not an update, okay? We have to say, I have to disclosure, this is inside of the Azure blog, but we
Mhm.
want to bring because we work with this every single week, the landing zone. And this is always one of our methodologies to just keep it simple. So, and we want to bring this, first of all, because it's co-authored by our good friend Thomas Maurer, that was an ex MVP, and now it's a Microsoft T in this case. And he helps read he helps wrote this in this case, this post, and he talks about that starting small, okay, and expand as you need. You do, and that's always the concept that I always want to bring when we starting talking about Azure and we're talking about the cloud journeys. You don't need to going like on this craziness. You need to just set up your landing zone. That is a very nice way to do it. Okay, it's based on the well architectured framework of Azure, and basically you have different areas inside of landing zone that you can start small. So you can start small, but the foundation is about the same to going from the small to the biggest. The foundation is there. If you start
Exactly.
small, you're just starting on the needs that you have. It the foundation is going to be the same, right?
Well, I think there's a misconception when it comes to using cloud, whether it be Azure, Google Cloud, Oracle, like whatever. So you've got to start somewhere, and the landing zone is the generally accepted architectural way to build your foundation in cloud. It's the cloud landing zone. That's where you're landing.
Yeah.
So everybody does start small. And it's important to note that the companies that uh, have trouble, I'm going to say, executing the landing zone methodology at the start definitely are going to be engaging guys like you and I when they run into trouble down the road, because they're going to have to re-architect things. And we want to avoid that. Now, that doesn't mean that Marcos and I don't want to work with you. We do want to work with you. What we're saying here is that we want to work with you once and put you off on the right foot.
Yeah.
And Microsoft is really addressing that concern. And I want to say, what's the word I'm looking for? Enticing businesses into the cloud and saying, you know what, you don't have to be like a Microsoft company, big with all these resources and everything all over the place. No, you can start small. Just design your foundation properly using, of course, the well-architected framework and a proper foundation, which is a cloud landing zone. And I absolutely love that they're really calling this out and putting some light on it, because I think it will attract more people to Microsoft Azure, knowing that Microsoft really supports the foundations.
And it's not only that; it's based on, like we mentioned, the Azure well architecture framework. It's based on the cloud adoption framework. It's based on a very good, solid framework that they should do it. It's like when we're talking about things like infrastructure as a code, and say, oh, no, I'm not a developer. You don't need to be a developer. You just are building your code, in this case, your way to deploy it. So you start small with 1 or 2 VMs, but the code is there. If you need to go
scale
completely, if you want to go bigger, is there the code. So you need only to develop one time. We need only to spend time that once. Yes, probably is going to take, that probably is going to be faster if you're going to on the portal to create those VMs. I'm not saying that, but that's a very good starting point. It's what I show to all my customers. Yes, if you are not familiar with ARM templates or something like that, please go use the portal. But there is, before you just hit the create, there is on the right side says download the template. Go there, download the template, and instead of creating the button start, open the template and deploy from there and see how easy is a template, how easy it is going. And now it's my turn to just plug the Microsoft Learn. In this case,
it's funny because I wanted to say it too. Good for you.
No, this episode it's my turn. I apologize, Andrew, but it's my turn to plug. And you have very good resources inside of Microsoft Learn, very simple ones to tell you how is address the configuration of ARM templates. Okay, and you can very easily starting to change those, and that can be your template with very easy. You can even create drop down boxes inside of the template. It's fairly easy to do that. You just need a couple of hours. You don't need to be an expert to do that, and bang, out of the box. If you spend like a couple of days involving on ARMs, you're starting to get. It's fairly easy to understand that part. And now you have a very simple infrastructure as a code. Of course, that you can go behind it and starting to leverage a lot of things that we're talking about here. It's the CI/CD, the continuous improvement, continuous deployment, using GitHub, using Azure DevOps, and starting to be a little bit more towards to the DevOps side of it. But again, you don't need to start building your Azure DevOps and now hiring developers to doing code to just building your infrastructure. No, you can do it by yourself. If you want to deploy that VM, you just use that template. That's it. Right?
Yep. Yeah. The one thing I want to add is when you're using the ARM templates, it gives you something that manual deployment can never give you, which is consistency.
Absolutely.
Right? So now your machines are built out the same way every time, whether it's me that deploys it, Marcos, or anybody else. So when you're being set up with ARM templates, the whole idea is that it becomes more manageable and it leads to good governance as well, right? It's the whole ecosystem, but it's about starting small. And I love what you're saying, because I was actually, I did this past week also look at, I remember from Ignite, they have those challenges. I did look at a few of them. I've done a few now. And I liked the one because it was a good refresher on ARM templates. So yeah, huge plug for Microsoft Learn from both of us. I mean, what's not to love? It's free. It's easy. And important for both of us as well as Microsoft certified trainers that we talk about Microsoft Learn and making sure that if you use and have Microsoft certifications, that you use the same login ID for your certifications on Learn so that it's easier for you to go and do your free renewals when it's time, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's very good point on that. That's
I
very
know
good
that
point.
that's not Azure related,
It's
but
not, but
it's
that's
important
okay.
for people working in
Yeah,
Azure, though.
yeah, absolutely. The next one, it's again not an update, okay, but it's talk about something that we've been talking over here for a long period of time. Is the commitment of Azure and Microsoft in this case to expand the Azure availability zones to more regions, because um, we already said that, and this is a difference that I like to bring, because not all of the regions have availability zones. And zones in
You
this
got
case means data centers within the same region. Again, to reinforce what we already said before, in this case on other episodes on this show, is a zone in this case is a data center. What makes this a region is the latency between those data centers. Okay, so we have, for example, on US East, and we said that on a couple of episodes ago, that they are
that's
already
right.
creating or developing the East 3. So means that we will have three regions out of the east of US. So what does that mean? Means that they have three data centers only out of the west or out of the east? No, it doesn't mean that. Means that the data center, for example, on East region and East 2, that each one of them have three data centers. Between them, the latency is what defines the region in Azure. Okay, and this is good to just explain a little bit more going on that in this case on this
Definitely.
blog post, because I highly recommend, not enough, to read this. Okay, and they even saying that by the end of 2021, okay, all all data centers regions, or in this case, all regions in Azure will have availability zones. And by doing
Correct.
that, and by saying this commitment, okay, what Azure, in this case Microsoft, is saying is we'll have more than one data center supporting those zones, even on the country ones, like Germany,
Yeah.
like UK, like Switzerland, and all of that. Even in Canada, we start Canada Central and Canada East with one data center only, and they only need that for starting a region. But for be
That's
able
correct.
to provide all the high availability that we required and all of that, they need to expand that, right? Because we
Absolutely. Yeah. And I actually just scrolled to the bottom of this article and noticed that, again, they're referencing our good friend, the Azure Well Architected Framework, and availability zones, availability sets, availability zones, and good design and uptime. A good part of local redundancies for disaster recovery is all part of that well architected framework. And I really, that, what a very big goal for Microsoft to set for end of 2021, end of this year. They're going to have availability zones
yeah.
available in every Azure region, and that's awesome. I know in Canada, Canada Central, there's been some
Yeah.
delays in getting there. So I'm really happy to hear that this year, this calendar year, we're going to get there. That's
And it's not
amazing.
only that. I'm very happy with this commitment, because when we talk with different public clouds, and now I'm going to address specifically AWS, it's one of their selling points. It says
It is.
we have lower regions or we have less region, not lower, we have less region than Azure, that other public, and they are referring to Azure, because all our regions, they have availability zones. And that was one of their marketing. I'm not saying that I'm against AWS. I think it's great. And
No, there's just differences
it
between
is,
them.
but
That's
now
all.
Azure has always been spreading across the world or having more regions than any other public cloud provider. And now this commitment to have availability zones means that they will be covered by different data centers. And it's great because, but then you may ask, why I care about this and why I should not care about regions. First of all, a region, there are a lot of reasons because of that. The first one is on the region, okay, you have inside of each region, we have a VNet. So you cannot extrapolate VNets across regions, first of all. So, but if you have availability zones, you can have exactly the same VNet across multiple availability zones. Okay, that is one of the things. Second is on availability zones, yes, you have different data centers and you don't have egress traffic because you are on the same region. If you have two regions, all of the egress traffic will happen. So there are a lot of things that we need to make sure that we are, and there are other things. It's like not all the regions have the same services available.
That's right.
And so basically these three, there are way more topics about this, but only these three makes the reason to choose availability zones instead of regions as your disaster recovery solution as well. Okay? And again, the availability sets were the initial way that we can deploy some high availability regarding VMs and all of that, but availability sets is within the data center. So if data center becomes unavailable for any reason, even if you have multiple availability zones with that region, the availability set is only for that data center. We have high availability on the rack on the same data center. So it's really good to understand the part of high availability. And now what I want to have a shameless plug is go to see one of my Azure concepts about high availability on Azure VMs, and then I will explain that way more detail about all of those concepts because I think I did a good job, and let me know if I did or not, because I can always record another one when I can go way more deep on this because I think this is really important in this case. And I apologize if I've been diverse or not on this, but again, like you said in the beginning on the intro, we have some passion about this, and availability is one of them.
It is, yeah, and with good reason because we need to build systems that are resilient.
Completely. Next update: directory scope share access signatures SAS in general available. So what does this mean in this case, Andrew?
So SAS certificates are kind of one of my friends, but really it allows us to scope a signature or it gives us a key to map to a storage account at the directory level now. So we can basically issue storage access rights, kind of like Active Directory would be used on-prem to say you can have this subfolder and anything underneath it. Now we can do that using a storage key, right?
Yeah.
So it's a really, really cool improvement. I actually did use this one in preview. It was really cool. I do a lot of stuff, building samples and sharing code and doing all that stuff. And I will deliver stuff using my Azure tenant from a storage account, and then say, okay, here's your key. Go hook it up, and you can grab it and bring it into your environment, and away you go. So sometimes, SharePoint doesn't bridge the gap, or if we have different data that we want to share that requires blob storage, and for whatever reason, it's just easier to do raw storage. This is going to allow us to do those connections a lot easier. So you can connect your systems from other tenants and from hybrid scenarios. It's really cool, right?
Yeah, it's really cool, and I cannot say any better than you. So I will skip to the next update. You did an amazing job, I have to say. So let's move to the last update of the show.
Oh, the last one already.
Yes, it's already past like 4 hours on our
4 hours, eh? Wow.
Yeah,
It was 15 minutes for IT.
it was 4 hours on the time, but 15 minutes on IT time. So yeah, you are okay. So HB V3 series VMs now available in East US, South Central US, and West Europe. And this goes along with an update that we had before regarding the same AMD EPYC 7003 series that we talk about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And talk about performance. And look at this. This V3 series of the HB will have 448 gigs of RAM only. Okay. Almost I have same on my laptop with 400 megs of L3 cache. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Although
so one of the things that's been catching my attention on the H series is the networking.
Yes, that's the part. But these machines doesn't have multi-threading, okay, I have to say, with no multi-threading, although they will have 340 gigabytes per second on memory bandwidth. Okay.
Bytes, not bits, right? Big B.
Big B, bytes. Did I say byte? Did I say bits?
No, you said it right.
Ah,
I just
okay.
wanted to emphasize because it's huge.
No, that's okay. And basically, yeah, they are using what's called the Infinity Band, right? From the partners of NVIDIA. So this is for HPC, the Edge Process Computing, and it's really, really a beast. And again, this is the type of things that we are seeing in Azure to come, and they are coming now as a GA for these three regions. Right?
Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, and I love the InfiniBand networking because in this case it gives us 200 gigabits per second of throughput. Yeah. That's pretty good right out of the gate without doing any kind of stacking on the NICs in the VM, right? So yeah. Really gives us a lot of flexibility when we're building out those systems. Yeah, really cool to see all this new hardware coming in, despite all of the challenges that are in our world today. So
absolutely. And with that, we come, unfortunately, with a sad face to our end of our episode of this show this week. So once again, if you like the content and if you reach over here, please don't forget to subscribe, give it a like, give it a thumb down, thumb up, shoot us a message. We can follow us on social media. We like stalkers, right, Andrew? In this case, and well, again,
I'm going to be careful with that.
Yeah, let me cut this part. Yeah, let me cut this part. That's okay. Moving on. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for being one of our champions on this show. Andrew, once again, it was a pleasure to have you on the show.
It's always fun. It's the highlight of my week. Thank you so much.
It is. And once again, thank you and bye.